My daughter framed me with fake drugs. I spent 5 months locked up while she sold on the streets. But forensic analysis of her phone revealed hundreds of incriminating messages, and now she's serving 8 years while my ex-wife still writes her love letters. I'm 47 years old, work as a supervisor at a manufacturing plant, and what my daughter did to me 2 years ago basically destroyed everything I ever considered my life. I spent 5 months in county jail for drugs I never touched, lost my marriage, and now I live alone in a shitty apartment across town while my ex-wife still writes letters to the person who put me there. I don't know why I'm telling this now. I guess because I'm finally angry enough to get all this out of my system, and the truth is, if I don't tell it, I'm going to explode. Lauren was always difficult, since she was little. She wasn't a bad kid, exactly. But there was something about her that never fit well with rules or structure. When she hit adolescence, things got worse, like much worse. She started skipping school, staying out late, hanging out with people I knew weren't good for her. But what could I do? You can't lock a teenager in the house 24/7. My wife always made excuses for her, said it was just a phase, that all kids went through that I was too hard on her. Maybe she was right at the time. I don't know. But looking back, I should have been harder. I should have put a stop to it way before everything went to shit. Lauren was like 16 when she dropped out of school. She just stopped going one day, and when we asked her what was up, she told us school was a waste of time, that she wasn't going back. And my wife basically shrugged and said, well, at least get a job then. I was furious. Told her if she wasn't going back to school, she had to contribute somehow, pay rent or something. But my wife made me look like the bad guy again. Turns out Lauren never got a job. She just stayed in her room all day or went out with her friends who were basically other dropouts and bums. This went on for like 6 months until she met this guy. I don't even remember his name now because he was so insignificant. And one day we came home, and there was a note on the kitchen table that said, I'm leaving, don't look for me. That was it, not even an apology or a real explanation. We didn't hear from her for 3 years, literally 3 full years. My wife was devastated, cried every night wondering where our daughter was, if she was okay, if she was even alive. I was worried too, obviously. She's my daughter after all. But part of me was also relieved that at least we didn't have to deal with her drama every day. We filed a missing person report, but the cops basically told us she was of age, and if she'd left voluntarily, there wasn't much they could do. I tried looking for her on social media, but she didn't have anything. It was like she disappeared from the planet. Then one day, like at 2 in the morning, the doorbell rings. My wife and I woke up scared because who rings the doorbell at 2 in the morning? And when I opened the door, there was Lauren. She was 22 at that point, but looked much older. She was skinny, pale, with her hair all messed up, and she had a backpack and nothing else. My wife immediately started crying and hugged her, and Lauren just said, "Can I stay here for a while? I have nowhere to go." The guy she'd left with had apparently dumped her in some town 3 states away, and she'd spent her last dollars on a bus ticket back. My wife, of course, said yes immediately, and well, what was I going to say? I couldn't leave my daughter on the street, even though part of me wanted to make her suffer a little for all the pain she'd caused us. The first few days, Lauren stayed in her room almost the whole time, only came out to eat something and went back to lock herself in. My wife brought her food like she was an invalid, constantly asked her how she was, tried to start conversations about what she'd done during those 3 years, but Lauren never said anything concrete. I tried to talk to her too, like sit down and have an adult conversation about what she was going to do now, if she was going to look for work, if she planned to stay permanently, or it was just temporary. But every time I tried to bring it up, she'd look at me with this annoyed face and say, "I don't know, Dad, leave me alone." My wife told me to give her time, that she'd been through a lot, but I thought, well, we went through a lot too when you left without saying anything. 2 months passed and Lauren still wasn't doing anything. Wasn't looking for work, wasn't helping around the house, wasn't paying anything, basically living for free in her teenage bedroom like nothing had happened. What she did start doing was going out at night again. She'd leave like at 9 or 10 at night and come back at 4 or 5 in the morning. I'd ask her where she was going and she'd say to see friends, but what friends if she'd been gone 3 years? It didn't make sense. My wife said, at least she was socializing, that it was good she was rebuilding her life. But I knew something wasn't right. I could see it in her eyes. In how she acted, there was something weird going on. 1. The day I came home from work early, like at 3 in the afternoon because they'd canceled the evening shift at the plant, and when I walked into the house, I heard voices in Lauren's room. I went upstairs and knocked on the door, and Lauren yelled, "What do you want?" And I said I wanted to talk to her. It took her like 2 minutes to open the door, and when she did, there was a guy there with her. A sketchy-looking guy, like in his 30 seconds, with neck tattoos and that look that people who are into weird stuff have. Lauren said he was a friend, but the guy didn't even say hi to me, just walked past me and left. I asked Lauren what was going on, and she said, "Nothing, Dad, relax." But I knew she was lying. That night, I told my wife that Lauren was into something bad, and that we had to do something. But she said I was being paranoid. Things continued like this for another month. Lauren still wasn't doing anything productive, still going out at night, still bringing weird people to the house. I was reaching the limit of my patience, honestly, because not only was she living for free, but she was also using our house for who knows what. Finally, one Sunday night, after Lauren came back at 5 in the morning making noise and waking us all up, I got up and went to her room. I told her we needed to talk and she told me to let her sleep, but I insisted. I said, "Look, Lauren, your mother and I have been very patient with you, but this has to stop. You need to get a job or leave. You can't keep living here doing nothing." She got angry and started yelling at me that I didn't understand her, that she'd been through difficult things, that she needed time, the typical excuses. I told her that time had run out and that I was giving her 24 hours to decide what she was going to do, either get a job or leave the house. Lauren didn't say anything else, just looked at me with this face of pure hatred that I'll never forget, like as if she wanted to kill me right there. I left the room and went downstairs for the kitchen to make myself coffee, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to go back to sleep. My wife came down after and started with the same thing as always, that I was too hard, that Lauren needed support. But I told her it was over, that I couldn't keep defending her when she was clearly taking advantage of us. We had an ugly argument that morning, my wife crying and saying I was going to push Lauren to leave again. In the end, my wife left for work without saying goodbye to me, and I stayed at the house because it was my day off. Around 2 in the afternoon, I was in the living room watching TV. When they knocked on the door, they were loud knocks, like police. I opened it, and sure enough, it was 2 officers who asked me if I was me. Obviously, I said yes, and they told me they had a search warrant based on an anonymous tip about drugs on the property. I stood there like an idiot, because what drugs? I've never touched a drug in my life. I don't even smoke cigarettes. I told them it must be a mistake, but they said they still had to search the house. And I said, "Go ahead, search whatever you want because you're not going to find anything." They started on the first floor, checked the living room, the kitchen, the dining room, nothing. Then they went up to the second floor and went to Lauren's room first. She was there and let them in, and I thought, well, if there's anything, it's going to be in her room, obviously. But they didn't find anything there, or at least that's what they said. Then they went to my room, the room I share with my wife, and started checking the drawers, the closet, under the bed. One of the officers crouched down to look under the bed, and I saw how his face changed, and he said, "I found something." He pulled out a black plastic bag that I'd never seen in my life, opened it, and inside there were like 5 or 6 smaller bags with a white powder that clearly wasn't sugar. My hands immediately, I started shaking, and I told them I didn't know where that came from, that someone had put it there, that I had nothing to do with it. The officers looked at me with that face they have when they think you're lying, and one of them said, "Sir, this is your house, your room, your bed. The drugs were hidden under your mattress." I told them someone put them there, that they weren't mine, but they said I had to come with them to the station. They put handcuffs on me right there in my room, while Lauren was standing in the hallway watching, and I swear to God I saw a little smile on her face, like almost imperceptible, but it was there. I tried to make eye contact with her, like for her to help me explain that this was a mistake, but she just turned around and went back to her room. They took me to the station, asked me all the typical questions, took my fingerprints, photo, put me in a cell. I called my wife from the station phone, and when I told her what had happened, she just started crying and asking me how I could do this to her, how I could bring drugs into our house, and I yelled at her that they weren't mine, that someone had planted them, but she didn't believe me. She hung up the phone before I could explain more. I spent that night in the cell thinking this was all a nightmare, that I was going to wake up any moment. But I didn't wake up. This was real. The next day, I had my bail hearing, and the judge, because of the type of drugs they were and the amount, decided I was a flight risk and denied me bail. I couldn't believe it. I literally couldn't process what was happening. My lawyer, a public defender, they assigned me because I didn't have money for a private one, told me it was going to take time to gather evidence to prove my innocence, that the system was backed up, that it could be months before the trial. Months, he told me. Like it was nothing. Like he hadn't just told me I was going to spend months in jail for something I didn't do. I spent 5 months in county jail waiting for my trial. 5 full months of my life in a cell shared with 3 other guys, sleeping on a metal bunk, eating food I couldn't even identify half the time. Not being able to see my wife because at first she didn't want to come visit me. My job obviously fired me after 2 weeks. My reputation was destroyed. The neighbors probably thought I was a drug dealer. My entire life had gone to shit because of something I didn't do. My wife finally came to visit me like a month and a half into being locked up. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept in weeks, and when we sat face to face with the glass between us, she just asked me why I did it. I told her again that I didn't do it, that someone put those drugs there to frame me, and she said, "But who would do that? Who hates you enough to do this to you?" I looked at her and said, "Think about it. Who was in the house that day? Who had access to our room? Who was bringing weird people to the house all the time?" She shook her head and said, "No, Lauren wouldn't do that. She's our daughter." I told her to wake up, to see reality, but she kept defending Lauren like she always had. The visit ended badly. My wife left crying and I went back to my cell, wanting to tear my hair out from frustration. Meanwhile, my lawyer was trying to build my defense and apparently had requested that they check Lauren's phone because he had a hunch. The prosecution resisted at first, but eventually the judge ordered them to turn over the phone for forensic analysis. What they found there was basically my salvation and Lauren's condemnation. There were messages, hundreds of messages, between Lauren and several guys about drugs, about sales, about deliveries, about quantities, about money. It was crystal clear that Lauren was into drug trafficking, and not just as a user, but as a dealer. There were messages specifically from the day before my arrest, where Lauren was telling someone she needed to hide merchandise fast because things were getting hot, and another message where she said she knew the perfect place where nobody would look. Besides the messages, when they finally processed the drugs they found under my bed, there wasn't a single one of my fingerprints on the bags, no trace of my DNA, nothing that connected me physically to those drugs. Instead, they found Lauren's prints on the outside of the big bag. Witnesses also appeared who had seen her with the guys who sold drugs in the area, people who confirmed she was known in that environment. My lawyer presented all this evidence, and the prosecution basically had no choice but to drop the charges against me. The day they released me was probably one of the worst days of my life, which sounds weird, but it's true. You'd think I'd be happy to get out, but all I felt was rage, a rage so deep it hurt my chest. 5 months of my life stolen, my job lost, my reputation destroyed, my marriage hanging by a thread, all because my own daughter had used me as a scapegoat to save her own ass. I didn't go straight home when I got out. I couldn't face that yet. I went to a bar and had like 6 beers trying to process everything. Lauren was arrested 2 days after my release. They found her in a shitty apartment across town, a disgusting place with mattresses on the floor and syringes everywhere, and she had more drugs with her, not just for personal use, but amounts that clearly indicated intent to distribute. They took her to the station and drug tested her. She tested positive for heroin, cocaine, and amphetamines. My wife called me crying when she found out, saying our baby was sick, that she needed help, that we had to support her, and I yelled at her on the phone that our baby wasn't sick, that she was a criminal who had deliberately ruined my life, who had let me rot in a cell for months, knowing perfectly well I was innocent. They found her guilty of possession with intent to distribute and filing false accusations. This last charge, because it was basically proven that she had made the anonymous tip that led to my arrest. The judge gave her 8 years in a drug rehabilitation and treatment center, which seemed too little to me considering what she'd done to me, but my lawyer said she was lucky they didn't send her to federal prison. My wife was devastated during the whole trial, cried all the time, And I just felt this huge emptiness where there was supposedly supposed to be love or compassion for my own daughter. After the trial, I got a restraining order against Lauren. My lawyer suggested I do it to protect myself legally in case she tried to contact me when she got out, and I said yes immediately. I don't want to see her ever again in my life. I don't even want to know about her. To me, she's basically dead. I know it sounds horrible to say that about your own daughter, but I don't care. She put me in jail knowing I was innocent. She let me suffer there, while she kept selling drugs and living her life. There's no forgiveness for that. Not for me, at least. The problem was my wife. She couldn't or wouldn't accept what Lauren had done. Kept making excuses, saying the drugs had changed her, that it wasn't really her who did those things. She started writing letters to Lauren at the rehab center. Long letters where she told her she loved her, that she was waiting for her, that everything was going to be okay. I asked her to stop, told her Lauren didn't deserve her compassion after what she'd done to us, but she kept doing it. We had terrible fights about this. Fights where I yelled at her and she cried, and eventually I realized I couldn't keep living like that. I told my wife we needed to separate, at least temporarily, because I couldn't be in that house with all the memories of what had happened. I couldn't keep fighting about Lauren every day. She said, I was abandoning our family when we needed each other most, and I told her our does. Family had ceased to exist the day Lauren decided to destroy me. I packed my things, the few I had left after 5 months of absence, and moved to a small apartment across town. It's a shitty place, honestly, but at least it's mine, and it's not full of ghosts. It's been almost 2 years since all this, and I still haven't spoken to Lauren even once. I don't even know how she is or if she's still in the rehab center or already out, and honestly, I don't care. My wife and I officially divorced 6 months ago. She still lives in the house, and from what I know, she still writes letters to Lauren. I got another job. Not as good as the previous one, but it pays the bills, and I basically live day to day trying not to think too much about what happened because if I do, it makes me want to break something. People ask me sometimes if I could ever forgive Lauren, and the honest answer is no, never. Maybe that makes me a bad person or a bad father, but I don't care. She crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. She took 5 months of freedom from me, took my job, my house, my marriage, my peace of mind, everything, and she did it consciously to save her own skin. There's no amount of apologies or rehabilitation that can fix that. Sometimes, at night I lie awake, thinking about that moment when I saw her smile while they arrested me, and that image never goes away. It stays there, burned in my brain, reminding me that my own daughter hated me enough to completely destroy me. And the truth is now I hate her just the same, maybe more, and that's something I'm going to have to live with for the rest of my life, I guess.